And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, once again to this very important section, the post-Easter report. Well, that's right. I hope you all had a wonderful Easter, a 4 days break, I think, which was much needed. Of course, we spent the weekend in Sydney, and tell you what, the number of people compared to Brisbane is just amazing. So there were so many, and this morning during my work I said, there's not that many people around here, and you feel that as soon as you just have come back from a very, very crowded Sydney. And of course the reason for the crowd was that everyone after a long time got a break, and many people break once, and of course the easing of the restrictions, and couple that with all the free public transport in Sydney. So all of those resulted in massive crowds in each and every shopping centre, in the streets. It was just chockers. But it was good to see everything coming alive once again. We'll take a look at some of the glimpses later in the show. But right now, let's get on with the show and see what's making news today. Of course, we know that there is a lot happening on the campaign trail. Well, both the leaders are on different sides of the country. Anthony Albanese is here in Queensland, while Scott Morrison is campaigning out west in Western Australia, on two ends of the countries. But there's a lot that is happening, and of course, this morning, there were reports about people not happy in Cairns. So, Cairns was one of the areas which was hardest hit with this lockdown. So, there was a lot that pivots around that. And with the election coming on, what can both the government or the incoming government promise? What are the promises? Then the big question is whether or not they'll be able to keep those promises. That's another, or deliver on those promises is another matter. But first of all, let's take a look at this report on what's happening with all the flood victims and the flood-prone schools, for that matter.
Grade 1 student Milton Gulliford is eager to start term 2.
I miss our playground because we had different playgrounds.
After Rockley was devastated by recent flooding, he and 50 other students attended alternative schools. Now they'll return after 5 weeks away.
It's absolutely outstanding, the way that the school landscape or streetscape has changed in the last 10 days. I don't think our community will be prepared for what they're coming back to.
Rockley State School was one of the worst hit. The flooding was so bad the administration block and classrooms had to be demolished. But within 2 weeks, it's been rebuilt. A silver lining for a community still coming to terms with devastating loss.
It was hard, especially because it was the second time in about 10 or 11 years where the whole school has been compromised.
We've still got a good majority of our neighbours, our young families within the community who are still out of home. We have empty houses still sitting without electricity.
These demountables will remain at Rockley State School for the next 2 years at least, while the Education Department plans what to do next with this and the 5 other flood-damaged schools. The temporary works have cost $50 million, but their future remains uncertain. Relocation is unlikely. Buildings will have to be raised.
I think there are guidelines that suggest you have to be about 6 metres above where the flood waters are.
The Education Department is developing a $200 million plan to flood-proof the schools. They're hoping the Commonwealth will pay half.
The federal government has to step up.
Despite a permanent rebuild being years away, those at Rockley view it as a chance to unite the community.
We now have an opportunity to build this incredible learning environment for our kids that we can have the whole community be a part of.
Rachel Rieger, ABC News, Brisbane.
That is good news that, the schools will be proof. And very soon we'll be joining with our Premiers Live. That's why I was on the other line with that. the schools in Queensland have now all been air conditioned. So almost 10,000 classrooms in all Queensland schools have now been air conditioned. So that's a major feat, and we will soon be featuring that. But right now, before we go into the election campaign, let's take a look at what else is making news. Of course, we've seen the demise of the Star Casino, and the casinos are not doing quite well. Well, here's another Australian casino which is losing its sparkle.
On an April night 4 years ago, when most of Sydney is knocking off, business is just getting started on level 1 of the Star Casino complex, in a special gaming room reserved for big money gamblers, many from overseas, brought in by a company called Sun City. This Sun City employee brings a sports bag into its exclusive room that's known as Salon 95.
Sun City staff accept a large amount of cash from a male which is located in a leisure bag.
Inside the bag, there's so much money that only a few handfuls are taken out and fed through the note counter at any one time.
We do not know the source of funds for those large amounts of cash.
That's correct.
The video shows the counted cash being wrapped, stacked, and then stashed under the desk. Years on, the Star's management has now been forced to publicly admit this should not have been allowed to happen.
There was a very high risk that money laundering was occurring in Salon 95.
I agree.
Casinos give a marvellous opportunity to different tiers of money laundering. In poker machines you can feed it in, it swallows up $50 and $100 notes. Then you can gamble for 5 minutes and then cash it out.
It's not rocket science. I mean, if somebody turns up with a big bag of cash, then it seems reasonable that you should ask them, where does the money come from? And the fact that this was never asked, it would seem, suggests that they really didn't want to know.
Back in the mid-1990s, Sydney's first casino was launched in a blaze of glitz and hype, promising a tourist magnet to rival the Harbour Bridge and Opera House, and an entertainment and jobs bonanza. And the Star downplayed concerns. It'd also be a magnet for money laundering.
Every table has a security camera, every player recorded on video. The casino management boasts it's the most secure gambling establishment in Australia.
But the casino became increasingly dependent on high-rolling gamblers flying in from China, where gambling is all but illegal. Dependent on the private junket tour operators that delivered many of these gamblers to the Star.
The reality is that most of the junket operators that are operating out of Macau are heavily suspected of being engaged in criminal activities.
Charles Livingston is a gambling researcher with Melbourne's Monash University. He says junkets make it harder for casinos to know how much each player contributed or where their money came from.
Effectively what you've got is you've got a closed circuit operation. What happens in the junket room, you might say, stays in the junket room.
It was deemed not fit to hold the licence for its third Australian casino.
This inquiry follows similar investigations in 3 states over recent years into arch-rival Crown.
Illegal, dishonest, unethical and not suitable to hold a licence.
Unsuitable at present to hold WA's only casino licence.
The interesting part about the current Star hearing is that it's no longer the case that Crown was a rotten apple in an orchard of lovely, ripe, juicy red apples. It's about a rotten orchard.
Professor Linda Hancock has been monitoring Australian casinos for decades. This latest inquiry, she says, provides further evidence companies aren't doing enough to comply with money laundering laws that are meant to stop criminals turning their proceeds of crime into legitimate funds.
The most shocking thing is the commonality. You have key employees of these casinos in 3 states saying more or less that they didn't know what was going on in their own casino.
Under federal law, casinos like the Star need to know who their customers are and must report suspected money laundering, along with flagging all cash transactions above $10,000. But the widespread use of junket operators can reduce transparency. The casino's relationship is with this third-party contractor, the junket operator, and not with the players. It's the junket that often finds the players, handles their money, and chases any debts. One of the Star's biggest sources of revenue was from the Sun City junket. Until last year, when the Star finally ended the decade-long relationship after Chinese authorities arrested Sun City's chief executive, Alvin Chow, on suspicion of gambling and money laundering offences. Years earlier, one of the casino's senior investigators prepared a report labelling Chow an organised crime figure whose business, Sun City, was laundering up to $2 million a day worldwide. The Star wrote 2 warning letters flouted by Sun City, and there was a string of incidents in Salon 95 caught on the casino's own surveillance cameras.
Wasn't the only appropriate way to manage the risk that Alvin Chow and Sun City presented at this time to stop dealing with them?
So big money laundering game there. How to turn your illegitimate case into a in our case which is legitimate. So pass it, and what they call through the wash. Through the wash is through the casino. Well, so there you are, ladies and gentlemen, on that. Well, right now, as I mentioned, that we'll be joining with the Premier's live coverage. So we have our Deputy Premier, Stephen Miles, there, and of course, we'll also be joined by Minister Grace. Yes, we're ready.
Term 2, and kids right across the state are going back to school after a well-earned Easter break, and we're here at Wavell State High School with the Education Minister Grace and our local MP Jimmy Sullivan to celebrate the completion of what has been quite an incredible program. We've spent the last 7 years since we were elected rolling out air conditioning into our state schools, and the last 2 years we've really accelerated that program, and now we've finished. Every learning space, every library, every teaching, every staff room is now air conditioned. It's been an enormous and complicated job, but Grace and her team have finished it 2 months ahead of schedule, so it was scheduled to be completed in June 2022. It's finished early, on budget. That means that last summer was the last summer that state school kids and their teachers will have to sweat through the summer in non-air conditioned classrooms. It's been a nearly $500 million program, $477 million, more than 10,000 classrooms, libraries and staff rooms. Many schools required electrical upgrades to be able to support the number of new air conditioners that needed to be put in. We've created 1,000 jobs during the process, which, given that we started this surge right when the COVID pandemic hit, it meant we could keep lots of people in work, including here at Wavell, where Alder Construction got the $1.6 million contract to install air conditioning in 66 classrooms and 4 video suites, so 66 learning spaces. We've also at the same time been rolling out more solar panels into schools to help offset the carbon emissions and electricity cost impacts. So they've installed 35,517 panels, a total of 12,746 kilowatts of solar. The new air conditioners also make those rooms safer from a COVID perspective, improved ventilation, which also of course helps with other viruses as well. So I might ask the Education Minister and Jimmy to say a bit about it.
Yeah, terrific. Can I say thank you to the students that welcomed us here this morning and to Executive Principal Liz Foster for having us here at Wavell Heights State High. And as the Acting Premier has just announced, we have completed over 10,000 installation of air conditioning units in 649 schools that we announced in February 2020 to be completed by June 2022. And we were trying to get them all completed for the welcoming back of the first day of Term 2. And I'm very proud to announce as Minister for Education that QBuild, together with the Department of Education, has achieved that milestone. And we can now say that every classroom, every library and every staff room throughout Queensland is fully air conditioned, and all our new schools now are built entirely and fully air conditioned. This has been an extraordinary rollout. Part of this is also our solar panel rollout of 800 schools, and we will have that completed on time by June 22. So it generates the additional electricity, clean energy to power the air conditioning units that we've put in schools, and this is an absolutely tremendous policy. $477 million in total over 4 years that we now have rolled out the air conditioning part and continue to roll out the solar panel part. Can I thank QBuild together with my department? It's an extraordinary achievement. This is 6 years and over 2 months ahead of the nearest policy by the opposition to air condition our classrooms and our schools. And we have delivered this during COVID. We reset the air conditioning and cooler schools program in February of 2020. And if people remember, I think that was right at the time that COVID hit us here in Australia and in Queensland. And we've been able to continue to roll this out, employ over 1,000 people during this program. And I want to thank all of those businesses that have had contracts with us. They've done an incredible job. And also to the Energex crews who had to obviously do the upgrades in internal and external electrical work sometimes so that we could have these units operate. As the Acting Premier has announced, there were 66 spaces here in this school that needed air conditioning, and it did require both internal and external electrical upgrades. They've all been done. They're all completed. Everybody is happy. We've visited some of the classrooms and the students have obviously got their air conditioning on today. It's a beautiful Brisbane day and it's wonderful to be able to see it firsthand, the comfort that they are now learning in. But can I say the biggest claps we get are generally from the staff, the teachers, the teacher aides. They absolutely love the cooler classrooms in which they're working in, and this is an incredible achievement. I know that other states have tried to do this and they're nowhere near completed. I think we're about one of the first states in Australia to be able to achieve this. It's an incredible outcome, and I'm very proud as Minister for Education to be able to stand here with the Acting Premier, with the local member Jimmy Sullivan, and of course with the staff and the Executive Principal here at Wavell Heights and the students State High School. Can I also welcome back the 6 very severely flood-affected schools are all open in Term 2, another extraordinary effort over the 6 weeks. Some of these sites, some of these schools, and I visited them all, they were like construction sites. There was so much damage, for example, in Milperra, and they are all welcoming back students today. And Rocklea, they are rocking. They have got new buildings there, new infrastructure, and they are welcoming back their students in buildings that I think they're very happy with indeed. We had to demolish 2 buildings on that school site because they were condemned. They'd been flooded a little bit too often, and they're very happy with the new facilities. But we do want to work on a bit of a long-term betterment and flood mitigation strategy for all of those 6 schools, and we'll be putting that action together with the Queensland Reconstruction Authority and hopefully looking at what can we do to mitigate these schools from flood. So welcome back to those 6 schools, and a big thank you to all the schools that welcomed those students, over 2,000 of them in their schools temporarily while we did all the work, the remediation work that we needed to do in those 6 schools. But very happy to be here for the start of Term 1. I think everyone's had a good break. Start of Term 2. Term 1 was like no other. this year, and I'm glad that everyone had a very restful holiday period. Now I'll refer to the local member, Jimmy Sullivan.
Thanks, Minister. It's fantastic to have the Acting Premier and the Education Minister here in the beautiful electorate of Stafford, and of course specifically here at Wavell High. You can see, Minister, just why we're so proud of this fantastic school and its community. Thank you to Principal Foster and the student leaders for showing us around today. And we could see from the classrooms just how the love of learning is just infectious with staff and students alike. Kids get a really great start at this school, whether it's on the rugby league patch or whether it's in the world-class performing arts centre. They put on a show of Matilda last year that is worthy of QPAC. It's a fantastic school across the breadth of the experiences that people get here. Can I thank the business managers and admin staff who did a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to the air conditioning. This is a well-established school. It's far from it.
It is a well-established school, and I know very well about that. I have done some, educational and religious education there for the students, and I know the school very well. Well, it's still good to see the local member coming out together with the Deputy Premier and the Minister for Education, because of course there is an election and everyone knows to know who the local members are, because some of them are very vocal, and some of them are very present in the community. Some of them are less seen until and unless there is an election. Well, the good news is about the schools, and of course you heard from the minister. She mentioned about Rockley, and in our earlier report we had that Rockley School was actually closed, and that the students had to go in makeshift or go to different school. But you have just heard from the minister that the school is now open for term 2. Well, right now let's move on and get to the other news that we promised today, the election. So, both the leaders are using scare campaigns on border protection and health.
Welcome back to WA.
Going west to defend a swathe of Liberal seats.
We've got manual steering here.
The Prime Minister came armed with cash for patrol vessels.
The helm is no place for the inexperienced.
And ready for a battle on boats.
When Labor abolished temporary protection visas in 2008, the armada of people smugglers' boats came to Australia.
Zeroing in on yesterday's stumble that forced another mid-campaign correction.
We don't support temporary protection visas.
Labor have learned nothing when it comes to border protection.
But scare campaigns go both ways.
Medicare is not safe under Scott Morrison and Anne Ruston.
Labor's using the change in Health Minister to stoke fears about the future of Medicare funding.
She said yesterday there wouldn't be any cuts, and I repeat that today.
In Queensland, where Labor holds just 6 of 30 lower house seats,
Hi, Oscar.
Anthony Albanese was reminding voters of the PM's response to the devastating floods in January.
He slept through the whole thing.
Receiving a different reception to the one he got at last night's Byron Bay Blues Fest. Polling conducted last week suggests the Labor leader's stocks might have fallen. Anthony Albanese now trailing Scott Morrison 30 to 38% on the question of preferred Prime Minister. Labor's primary vote also down 4 points to 34%, while the coalition's up slightly to 35%.
It's a mountain that Labor seeks to climb.
This will be ScoMo.
After a steady start, today Scott Morrison suffered his own campaign misstep, messing up the details of the dole.
How about that?
Which we increased from $40 a week to $46 a week.
Love you, ScoMo.
Later clarifying it's $46 a day.
Oh, I misspoke. It was pretty straightforward.
The Easter truce is officially over. Labor has turned noticeably more negative, with Anthony Albanese attacking Scott Morrison's character and reviving Labor's Mediscare campaign. The Prime Minister is using Mr Albanese's campaign missteps to fan the fear of the unknown and convince voters to stick with the devil they know. Jane Norman, ABC News.
Sticking with the devil, and fanning themselves. Well, that is an election campaign which is going to get more intense as we get closer. Well, of course, right now, our Prime Minister has tipped the job seeker payment figures. So let's take a look at that report.
That's why programs, particularly like Commonwealth Rental Assistance, which is some $5.1 billion, which is paid every year to support people on lower incomes, and that, from memory, is indexed on the cost of living. And so that continues to be combined with the other payments that we have that people get access to, and whether that be in income support through the job seeker, which, as you know, we increased from $40 a week to $46 a week since the last election.
Prime Minister, do you know?
We can, of course, as he mentioned there, that it was misspoken, and all of these things will be picked up, so they better be very, very careful.
The major parties had pledged something of a pause in hostilities as much of the nation switched off for a long weekend.
Easter's not about politics.
But in an election campaign, everything is about politics.
Oh, you know me, I'm sweet as.
Both leaders promised to extend subsidies for diabetics, while Labor vowed to legislate a federal anti-corruption watchdog by the end of the year.
That's ultimate transparency.
At the moment, though, many observers argue this election isn't being fought on policy, it's being largely driven by personality.
Hello, how are you?
And it's the opposition leader currently copping the most criticism.
How do you grapple with such a damning assessment of your performance?
I said when the campaign opened that we were the underdogs in this campaign. I've consistently said that it's a mountain that Labor seeks to climb.
The opposition had hoped this campaign would be a referendum on Scott Morrison's record in office and whether he can be trusted. But a narrow focus on personality and performance tends to cut both ways, amplifying even small mistakes.
Happy to take just a couple of questions.
Do you remain committed to Operation Sovereign Borders, and if so, do you support the retention of temporary protection visas?
Yes.
But that was wrong. The opposition's border and asylum seeker policies are very similar to the government's, but Labor has long opposed temporary protection visas.
Earlier on, I heard half the question and didn't hear all of it. We support offshore processing. We support resettlement in third countries. We don't support temporary protection visas.
It was the second clean-up required in just a few days. Last week, the opposition leader was quizzed about his $135 million promise to fund 50 urgent care clinics.
This has been fully costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office, PBO.
But it hadn't been. It was only apparently informed by work done by the PBO.
So who's done the costing? Well, it's costing based on organisations that we've been talking to that do this work.
The helm is no place for the inexperienced.
No. Scott Morrison has seized on the confusion, claiming again that it's proof the coalition is best placed to manage the budget and the nation's borders.
After all of this time, Labor have learned nothing.
Anthony Albanese really has to be focused on the fine detail of the policies that he's putting forward.
How's the strategy going, Mr.
And of course, whenever you're putting down policies, you really, really need to be careful, very choosy on your words, and that's what makes a good politician, because one slip and the media's on top of that, and they will keep repeating that, so on social media, on everything. So yeah, they better be careful. Well, right now the next report is on travelling, and we will also look at a little bit of Sydney after that as well. So, everyone's out and about, and we were warned that, getting to the airport would be a tough job because there will be long queues and that parking would be a big problem. We managed to get our online parking, as many people had complained that they could not get online parking spots. Maybe I had already an account, a login details, so I logged in and got my spot. I didn't have any problem with that. The only thing there was this time, instead of going in and logging in with your credit card, you were always provided with a barcode. The barcode is on your phone, and you can also have a printout of the barcode. So you swipe the barcode and in you go. Find a spot and Bob's your uncle. The other part was that long queues at check-in. There was fair number of people, I must say, but it wasn't like wow, so we took the advice and we were there early, so we were quite early in fact, but nevertheless we enjoyed our time there in the lounge. And the flight, of course, you need to have your mask on. That's still not bad. Sydney was slightly more congested than Brisbane Airport. Of course, everyone's heading to Sydney or going out of Sydney. So that airport there was quite busy. Here's that report.
Busy airports, beaches and restaurants across the state have provided a treat far sweeter than chocolate for tourism providers this Easter.
It's got that vibe again, and the restaurants are full and people are happy, and the guests have been absolutely amazing.
While international numbers are still low at Brisbane Airport, the domestic terminal was buzzing as travellers made the most of the break.
Today alone, we'll see about 58,000 passengers through the domestic terminal and around 52,000 tomorrow.
In North Queensland, crowds at Billabong Sanctuary traded the Easter Bunny for snakes and crocodiles.
Saturday was our busiest day in potentially 2 to 3 years, which was really good to see.
Many headed west for the weekend, where Longreach's Dan Walker says a bumper tourism season is only just kicking off.
It buzzes the town, everyone's got a smile on the doll.
In Noosa, visitor numbers were 15% higher than pre-COVID levels.
We've seen a switch with people not going overseas and they're coming to Noosa, which is great news.
Occupancy was up on the Gold Coast, with many holiday apartments and hotels booked out. Bookings are expected to remain strong well beyond the Easter break. Some Queensland operators say occupancy is looking good for next month, with visitors also booking ahead for the winter holidays and even Christmas.
This time 2 years ago, we were looking at single-digit figures for occupancy of hotels, so it's come a long way, but it's been a long time coming.
The state government is also looking forward with the launch of new campaigns targeting travellers from New Zealand.
New Zealand represents our second largest international market pre-COVID, and we want to see that come back very, very soon.
A long weekend going a long way to restoring confidence for an industry on the mend. Heidi Sheehan, ABC.
An industry on the mend, and I must say that the numbers in all the hotels and in Sydney, because we normally stay in few of the chains where we are members of, but obviously they were all sold out. We left it a little bit too late to book, but nevertheless, being member of many rather than just one always pays dividends. So we managed to get into Hilton right in the center of the city, about 5 minutes away from Darling Harbour and from all the activities, and right opposite QVV, which is a bustling place, and then up, down, and even downstairs reminded us of Delhi. That's the markets there are similar to that, but in a much better organized manner, of course. But once again, it was wonderful to see. And then we did a booking in the two restaurants. One night at the Glass Brasserie, which is a Luke Mangan restaurant right in the Hilton, and the other night at the Taj Palace Indian restaurant. And of course, that was also full. And I must pay tribute to the workers there working through the Easter holidays and doing a wonderful job of trying to fit everyone in. Of course, right now also the fleets, meaning the cruises, have arrived.
Pacific Explorer, Sydney Beach, yes.
After more than 2 years in deep water,
we would like to welcome you back to Australian waters.
A $5 billion industry rebirths in Sydney.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting us home.
The cruise ship ban has been lifted and the Pacific Explorer was given an almighty homecoming. A guard of honour, spectators out at sea and an industry ready to get back to work.
This is a message we send to all of Australia. Tourism is back, and it's a message we send to the rest of the world.
The last 2 years have been anything but smooth sailing for suppliers and travel agents. The Ruby Princess COVID fiasco brought an end to cruising in Australia and decimated an 18,000 strong workforce.
Absolutely terrible. I've not earned a cent since the 1st of March 2020.
I don't think we've had an easy week right across that whole time. We lost all of our young team in our business.
But cruises are back in New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria under new COVID protocols. You must be fully vaccinated and test negative before embarking on the ship. Masks, sanitisation stations and social distancing will also be common practice.
Australia is one of the last markets to return to cruising, and there have been over 10 million passengers around the world who have confidently gone back to cruising.
It's hoped the return of the Pacific Explorer today will show other states still reviewing their situation, like Tasmania and South Australia, that this isn't a false start and that the cruise industry is back. Some eager travellers have already lined up their next trip.
We'll be on the first cruise out and the second and the third and the fourth.
I'm not kidding when I say I am ready to go. Like, I've genuinely packed everything.
But with COVID still rife, not everyone is on board.
I'm probably more hesitant to do it at the moment.
The first cruise departs on May 31st. Cameron Gok, ABC News, Sydney.
Good boys. I'm going to start a video, okay?
Look, it's already spinning.
Yeah, it is already spinning, but you can spin it more. Okay, I'm starting a video. Look here. Hello, boys. You're on a gondola.
Some glimpses of our trip.
Everyone will put a photo on there. This one is like...
And as per the report, we also went cruising. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a few of the glimpses of Sydney, and as you can see, the magnificent harbour there, and lots of people in and about. Well, right now it's time to end today's news, but before we do that, let's go and take a look at that situation in Ukraine.
More explosions have been reported here in Kyiv today after several days of missile strikes broke the relative calm that's been building in this city since the withdrawal of Russian forces more than a fortnight ago. Russian forces have been bombarding several cities across Ukraine today, including the western city of Lviv. Now, that's been considered a safe haven and has remained largely unscathed until today. But today, at least 7 people are dead and more injured, including a child, after rocket strikes on military facilities and a car tyre service point, according to officials. The local mayor says the 7 dead are civilians, and that car tyre service facility was no military facility at all. Missiles were seen streaking across the sky there this morning. To the east, the city of Kharkiv, near the Russian border, that's Ukraine's second biggest city, is under extremely heavy shelling attack today. After heavy shelling that was targeting the residential areas, the Russian forces have been moving into the city, shelling downtown areas in recent days, including yesterday when our team got caught up in an attack. We're told that civilians have been urged to take shelter all day today because of the heaviness of those attacks. And other cities are being hit by bombardment as well, Mykolaiv and Odessa in the south. These attacks across Ukraine today and in recent days are seen to be revenge for the sinking of Russia's flagship Moskva, for which Ukraine claims responsibility. That was an extremely embarrassing naval loss for Vladimir Putin and Russia's biggest naval loss since World War II. Well, until now, a sense of security had really started to creep back in here in Kyiv and Ukraine's west after Russia announced it was focusing its offensive on the east. We've seen more cars on the roads here, more people on the streets out and about, and more people crossing back into Ukraine across the border. Today there were more people crossing into Ukraine than escaping, and that gives a real sense of the mood here. But as I said, that's shifting. More than a fortnight after Russia said it was shifting to a major offensive on the east, shifting its target from here, these bombardments are a warning from Russia that civilians, that Ukrainians across the country could be still in its sights.
There you are, ladies and gentlemen, the news update post-Easter. And as we know that our daily India report will resume from tomorrow, and it has been wonderful having your company. And the key things has been that everyone's had a pretty good Easter break, and of course in Queensland all the schools have now been air conditioned and the term 2 begins, meaning that people, the roads might be a little bit busy around the pickup and drop off time as parents make their way to drop kids and pick them up. So be careful on the roads, especially around the school zones. And by tomorrow we'll see if we can look at how we fared on the road compared to other years during this Easter. As we know, in Queensland we had a pretty shaky start when those 4 were killed in Toowoomba in that car crash when a little car hit that big semi-trailer. With all those news, and the campaign is full on, as we have seen, and so we'll keep that up to date, and as promised we'll try and bring some of the candidates right here in the studios to talk to you about policies that matter and the policies that they would be able to take to election and the possibilities of fulfilling those ones and how they have been, how those policies have been costed. And that has been a key question asked to the Leader of Opposition as well, which he failed to answer. Well, he said it's been costed when it was not costed. So you need to be very, very careful on that campaign trail as to what you really say and blurt out. And of course, don't forget that tomorrow we will have the real estate update with Usha Chandra right here. So, welcome back once again. It's good to be back, and I think everyone's recharged and rolling, ready to go. A good break after a long time when things were actually open. With that, there will be wonderful things that will be coming around. Well, from tomorrow we'll also bring back the functions and events after we have vetted and gone through all the ones that are taking place and what's going to happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's been wonderful having your company. We'll see you all back tomorrow. Until then, it's goodbye from us.